Instagram is cracking down. The social media app is making teen accounts private by default in an effort to make the platform safer for children. The new move comes amid a growing backlash, bipartisan backlash, against how social media affects kids' mental health. Now, Meta acknowledged that teens may lie about their age and says it will require them to verify their ages in more instances. The social media giant also said that they're building tech that's capable of finding teen accounts that pretend to be adult accounts. Private messages will also be restricted on teen accounts so that they can only be received from accounts they're already connected to. Plus, sensitive content will be limited, and teens will be notified if they're on the app for more than 60 minutes, with a sleep mode automatically enabled from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Now, 16 and 17-year-olds will be able to turn these settings off, but if you're under 16, you'll need your parents' permission to do so.
Of course, Meta faces lawsuits from dozens of U.S. states that accuse the company of harming young people and contributing to the youth mental health crisis by knowingly designing features on their app that addict children to its platforms. New York Attorney General Letitia James's office is working with other New York officials to implement a state law that would curb children's access to social media feeds. James writing on X, quote, "We know that social media is hurting our kids, and that's why we led the charge to protect our kids on social media platforms. This is an important first step, but much more needs to be done to ensure our kids are protected from the harms of social media." Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn, who is pushing the House to pass the Kids Online Safety Act, wrote on X, quote, "From exposing kids to drugs, explicit material, traffickers, and more, social media platforms are pushing harmful content onto our children. The Kids Online Safety Act would require social media companies to enable the strongest privacy settings for children by default and to disable algorithms that show addictive products, among other provisions."
But many supporters of free speech and civil liberties oppose this bill. Republican Senator Rand Paul wrote that CASA would impose an unprecedented duty of care on internet platforms to design their sites to mitigate and prevent harms associated with mental health, such as anxiety, depression, and eating disorders. This requirement will not only stifle free speech, but it will deprive Americans of the benefits of our technological advancements. And frankly, Instagram willingly implementing these kinds of features that many parents want is, I would actually take it as an example of just the company solving its own problems without legislation coming in and trying to rework how the platform functions in ways that could potentially harm everybody's free speech. Because again, if you have a federal policy that requires what the Kids Online Safety Act is going to require, well, it's not just, there's no way to just require kids to have to verify their ages. That's saying everybody's going to have to do it. And is that constitutional? Is that consistent with the First Amendment? I don't know. We'll have to find out one day before the Supreme Court. I would bet not, because the Supreme Court famously said that you couldn't have a state law in California restricting the sale of violent video games to minors because they thought the harm arguments were BS and that it was a free speech violation. I don't see how this is going to be any different. You know, she says, Letitia James and Marsha Blackburn, that
very interesting bedfellows, Letitia
Yeah, there's
James
a lot of bedfellows.
and Marsha Blackburn together on this issue.
At some of these hearings, when they haul the tech leaders before Congress and scream at them, it's Democrats and Republicans doing it with like lone, wacko, libertarian people that I like Rand Paul saying, really?
As this government's role, yeah.
Because, you know, there are certainly some harms. I'm not saying social media is good for everyone in all cases. Definitely cases where it has harmed young people. But, you know, the casual assertion that we've just determined that this product is bad for young people in the same way that like smoking is bad for young people or something. It's not, the science on that is not settled to that degree at all. Some young people are using social media. They're using it right now to watch my television show, which I hope educates them about the state of the world, right? It would be very silly for me to say that social media is universally harmful. It makes me suspicious a lot of times. Well, who's saying that? And what do they want? What sources of information are they trying to protect you from that they want to turn off or limit your access to a way to get information that is outside and beyond their control? Of course, they seek more control over it. It makes me very suspicious and very reticent to sign on to any of these broad federal efforts to put more control over the content on the internet into, I understand why we don't trust many of the tech moderators, the people who run the companies, but it's transferring their authority, which, fine, be skeptical of their authority, but it's transferring that authority to Congress, in whose authority I am infinitely more skeptical of.
Well, certainly, and to your point, I think you're seeing this action taken by Instagram after years of review and conversations with parents and I'm certain mental health professionals about taking these actions without government forcing this on them. They're being good, corporate citizens responding to a problem that a lot of youths have in terms of issues with social media and loneliness. But I think this speaks to a larger issue with young people writ large in this country. Coming out of COVID, and we've had conversations about some of the really terrible issues coming out of COVID in terms of mental health with young people, loneliness among young people, and that social media sometimes aggrandizes some of those issues that kids are feeling. But certainly I'm hopeful that corporate actors taking this upon themselves to address the situation with young people and with parents at the table is the right step, as opposed to a government intervention, right? That's going to be blanketed across all these different tech companies. Certainly.
Well, parents want these features, and more choice and control and customization coming from the platforms, from the companies themselves, is always going to be beneficial, so that parents can have more tools to make the right decisions for their families. Of course, I agree that. It's the natural state of affairs that underage kids have to have their parents' permission or buy-in, and should only be able to participate on the social media site to the extent parents and families think it's a good idea. The reasonable limits should be set by families, but that's
and
really
every kid
how
is different, and every parent is different, right? And blanket rules.
100%.
Right?
Some kids may be better off with no social media. Some would be better off with some limited amount. Some kids would be more miserable if you suddenly took away their entire access to their phones, to their friends, to content. It's a creative and expressive enterprise for a lot of people. So I wouldn't, by law, suddenly shut down their access, because also it's substituting the judgment of families for the judgment of Congress. Because right now, the default is families they should have more resources to make it easier for families to set what the limitations are. But I don't want to take that power out of parents' hands, which is what some of these legislations would do, because they would say that, well, no, you have to show ID, or you have to be a certain age, or it's whatever Congress determines, rather than what individual families determine. And that's not, I don't want the government to be your parent either.
And interestingly enough, COSA was one of the few, we have a very divided Congress, right?
I know, 91 votes.
That
doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Exactly right. But this was one of the few things that has actually passed the Congress. Obviously, it's going to come up, I'm sure, for a final passage. But it is interesting that this is one of the few things that Congress has actually been able to act on, right? We haven't started funding the government just yet, but in these divided times that we've seen, this kind of bipartisan support is interesting, and to our original point, interesting bedfellows across party lines.
I'm not someone who wants more bipartisanship. I start to get a little skeptical and so they agree that there should maybe be a government commission that decides if there's too much bad or harmful content on social media. Is that going to be the best thing for the American people? I worry it will not be. And also, I do suspect someday there will be a massive Supreme Court ruling on
certainly.
what the standards will be for social media and for young people, and whether it's speech or not. And this court, as currently constituted, is so pro-free speech, so broad on the First Amendment, that I have a hard time imagining them saying that, Congress can decide that you can turn off the access to social media for huge swaths of the population. That's consistent with the First Amendment. I don't see them saying that, but we don't know.
And all I know is that Congress has come a long way from those hearings with Mark Zuckerberg and internet tubes and things like that, and how Facebook makes its money. Remember that famous hearing from a decade ago?
I think nothing disabuses the American people of the notion that Congress should have more control over social media than watching those hearings where they don't even understand. Our very, very elderly members of Congress asking basic questions
internet tubes
about how it works.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was pretty extraordinary.
Not very knowledgeable people there. We'll be back with more Rising right after this.